Okay, so today's video, I'm going to share about Bhuta Shuddhi. I'm just getting ready to make a fire. And I'm going to share with you about the path of yoga, about fire, about the elements, the bhutas. So stick around if you want to have a little satsang by the fire. You can really consciously connect to the elements and also the corresponding chakras in the subtle body, because each of the elements connects to one of the chakras. Right? There you go. We have the earth, Muladhara, water at Svaristhana, fire at Manipura, air at Anahata, space at Vishuddha, the throat, and then the Agya chakra, the third eye, is beyond the elements. And each of the elements in the chakras, their corresponding chakras, has a bija mantra associated with it. And what a bija mantra is the seed sound of the mantra. Like a seed contains all the codes of the tree, right? And so it is said that the seed of the earth element is lam. The seed sound of the earth element is lam. The seed sound of the water element is vam, V-A-M. The seed sound of the fire element, here we are making our fire, Om Agnaye Swaha. It's the invocation for the fire. The seed sound, the bija mantra for the fire element is Ram, R-A-M. The seed syllable and sound for the element of air at the heart is Yam. The seed syllable for the element of space at the throat is Hum. Once we get to the third eye, Om. Lam, Bam, Ram, Yam, Hum, Om. And we work with these 5 plus 1, these 6 bija mantras to triangulate using our awareness, the power of our mind, of concentration, and also the power of vibration in the voice, to triangulate and isolate each of those areas moving up the spine. Lam at the root, Vam at the sacrum, Ram at the solar plexus, Yam at the heart, Hum at the throat. Can't do anything around here. The bird's always going off. Hum at the throat, and then Om. Of course, we just went through that, so you know that now. Lam, Bam, Ram, Yam, Hum, Om. And the yogis, it's such a mystery to me how they figured any of this out. Like, really, it's a mystery. But it makes sense to me. Like, humans have been sitting around fire for a really long time. And the evidence shows that we've been circling around fire for longer than the modern human brain. The modern human brain is about 200,000 years old. And the evidence shows that we've been circling around fire for at least 750,000 years, 750,000 years. And where am I getting with that? What's my point? Well, when it comes to, and this is just my understanding, right? This is how I've interpreted through my research and study, being a practitioner for the past 11 years. The tradition of yoga was originally an oral tradition, which means that the wisdom was passed down without books. It was transmitted orally through stories and myths and different teachings. And it was only about several thousand years ago that the importance of writing down the wisdom became apparent to the humans at the time. And we look at the Rig Veda, which is the oldest written body of knowledge, the oldest scripture, the oldest written piece of literature ever that's surviving today. There could be older ones, but this is the oldest one that's still alive today. And it was somewhere around 4,000 years ago that the Rig Veda came into existence and was authored. And the thing about the Rig Veda that I find so fascinating, and we'll get back to Bhuta Shuddhi in a moment, this connects to fire. The first line of the Rig Veda, the very first line, says Om Agnim Ile Purohitam. Om Agnim Ile Purohitam. You may remember from my invocation just a moment ago with the fire. Om Agnaye Swaha. Agni. Agni is the god of fire. And Agni was originally worshipped far more prevalently, you could say, than any other deity. It was the sun. The sun was, and still is today, in many primary cultures, primary, how do I say, like original religion. I mean, if you can imagine that. Like what was the first spiritual system to humanity? And it was elemental, right? It was a natural, a way of looking at the world and relating to the world, the natural world and the forces in the natural world as deities, as divine beings, that there was a god or a goddess of fire and a god or a goddess of water and a god or a goddess of the earth. Look, I'm holding this piece of wood here. And just a fun fact real quick about the wood. So wood is earth, plant matter, that combines with water and using a process known as photosynthesis, it eats the sun, it consumes the sun. That's how plants live, is through sunlight and water and nutrients in the soil and stuff like that. And the fascinating thing about that is that the plants absorb and consume the sun, and then they store that energy of the sun, the solar energy, into the plant. And what happens when we look at fire is a friction process, that is increasing the speed of the molecules, increasing the heat until they reach their, the bonds break, the bonds between the molecules break. And that is what is combustion. In combustion, when the bonds break and the molecules break apart, and then there's a release of smoke and carbon and other things, what we see in the fire as the fire is actually sunlight that has been trapped inside of that plant, inside of that wood. It's sunlight. So the worship of fire and the worship of the sun are essentially the same thing. And what I'm getting at with this, what I'm getting at in this is that there's similar chemical and alchemical processes happening inside of us, right? Like it only makes sense. And the yogis were keen on investigating and figuring that out through a process of what I call spiritual science, and in engaging with and interacting with sacred technology of the cosmos, you could say. Like the human nervous system and the brain is a infinitely sophisticated piece of bioelectrical, it's a biocomputer, right? It's a quantum biocomputer, the nervous system, the brain, our senses. And yoga as a technology is a way to interact with those cosmic forces. They're primordial, they're ancient. We're talking about intelligence that's far older than the human, right? You follow me on this? It's so fascinating. I find it so fascinating. And I go a lot into detail on this in my book, in the 5 elements of Tantrik Hatha Yoga. But there's so much more to be shared and to learn. And, you know, I feel like I'm just a beginner, you know? Like I feel like I'm still learning so much. And look, watch as I pour the coconut oil on the fire. The fire loves to be fed. And so going back to Om Agniim Ile Purohitam, that first line of the Rig Veda, it means, the translation is Om, Aum, which is the cosmic sound. I'll get to that in a moment because let's bookmark Om. And then the second word is Agni, fire. So if you could think about that for a moment, the significance of that the first written word other than Om, and Om is just like the infinite, so of course Om comes first. But for all intents and purposes, the first written word is Agni, A-G-N-I, Agni, means the god of fire, or the divine being of the fire. And when you think about it, it's like humans try to personify everything. They try to turn gods into humanistic form. But if we're talking about an intelligence in a like a pattern of life, right? Like some sort of ancient pattern, it's way older than humans. You catch my drift? Like humans came onto the scene around 200,000 years ago and started to try to make sense of the world. And we tried to make sense of the world by projecting our consciousness, our awareness onto the forces around us. The wind, the water, the fire, the earth, the space, all of these different categories of existence, dimensions, and that all of them intersect and interweave to create life. The idea of Bhuta Shuddhi is that Bhuta means element, right? I think you knew that by now, but if you didn't, then it means element. Bhuta, it's like, then you got to get the sound. Bhuta. Shuddhi means purification, purify. And in the process of, I think, connecting to the bhutas, connecting to the elements, there's a purification that occurs. Why? Because the mind likes to create its stories about reality, right? This is really the root of our suffering in any instance is the patterns in our mind. And it's possible to create better patterns of thinking, better patterns of being. And that happens through rewiring the nervous system, which is a process of transformation. And why do I bring that up? Because fire, the essence of fire is transformation. The fire takes and consumes, once there's combustion, it consumes the fuel and it turns it into basically a fertilizer, and it repurposes life. So if there's anything in me that's stuck, like stuck energy, just like trapped sunlight, trapped light, through a process, an inner alchemical process that the yogis call sadhana, we learn to release those areas where the energy is trapped. And as the energy is released from being trapped, it begins to circulate again. It not just between us in our own little system, but between the solar system, the universe, the cosmic system. You see what I mean? The energy of life on Earth is from the sun, giving life to the life on Earth. And eventually everything returns that light, and it continues to circulate. And the path of yoga is seen as the return journey home, making our way back to the source before we reach the end of our life. That was done, theoretically, the yogis suggested that was done in the subtle body, through the chakra system, in the spine. Makes sense, right? So all of these codes, all of these secrets are hidden right there in plain sight. You know what I mean? Like they're just right there. And studying and learning and reading about all this stuff, I'm just constantly amazed that there's more to learn. There's a continually, it's a deepening process and a refinement. I go back to when I first learned about Bhuta Shuddhi about 10 years ago, 2016, 9 years ago. And specifically learning about working with the chakras and working with the bija mantras and working with a pattern known as spinal breathing, which some of you are familiar with if you've practiced with me. Spinal breathing pranayama is inhaling and exhaling up and down the spine.
Draw the breath up as you inhale to the third eye. Pass through each of the chakras as you're breathing in. Once you arrive at the third eye, hold for just a moment, floating the breath, and then exhale from the third eye down to the root. Slow exhale. We call this spinal breathing.
And that purifies the channel of, the yogis see that there are three main channels, very important. And the most important is what's known as the Sushumna Nadi. The Sushumna Nadi is seen as the pathway of light, the pathway of fire. We have the Ida and the Pingala on the masculine and Ida would be feminine, Pingala would be masculine. So we have the feminine and the masculine polarities in us. These are the nadis, these are the channels of energy in us. And those are seen as the lunar and the solar. Right, here's my left, Ida. Here's my right, Pingala. Lunar, solar. Feminine, masculine. And everything has these dualities in it. Up, down, left, right, forward, backward, in, out. The universe is formed on the pattern of centrifugal and centripetal forces. When we're spinning around in a circle, there's a force that pulls you in and there's a force that pulls you out. What does all this have to do with Bhuta Shuddhi? Yoga is the balancing of the opposites. And in the balancing of the opposites, there's the center point, there's the stillness, the absolute. I believe that the path of yoga is the return journey home. It's not like a one and done process. It's a gradual, step-by-step process, dipping our toe in again and again and again to that. In the path of yoga, it's a return journey home, dipping our toe in again and again and again to the infinite, to be submerged completely into the infinite, and to release and let go of our attachment just for a moment to our identity. The personality, the thoughts, the things that we are attached to, that we think of as us, that we identify with. And in that untangling process, in order to untangle, sometimes friction is needed. And friction is what the yogis call tapas. Tapas. In the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali says that Kriya Yoga is tapas, swadhyaya, ishvara, pranidhana. That evolutionary action, right, Kriya Yoga, the activity that liberates, is one of the ways we can look at this definition of Kriya Yoga. An activity that liberates and brings us into coherence. It brings us into unity, where all the trapped little pockets of light are that we need to release in order for them to circulate again, and that we can participate in the great pattern of life. In order for that to happen, the first step is tapas, the friction, because it breaks the bonds. It breaks apart the chains, the things that are keeping things stuck together. Just like friction creates fire. There's an inner fire in us, in you and me. And that's light, that's sunlight that's been trapped. And in some cases, that's a good thing. Like, in order for us to be alive, that needs to happen. But every time we go through a transformative process where something changes in our being, in our whole way of being, our personality changes. And in order for our personality to change, transformation. The process of Bhuta Shuddhi as connecting to each of the elements, lam, bam, ram, yam, ham, om, is a process of transforming our relationship to each of those energies. Anywhere that energy is stuck in my connection to the element of earth, which corresponds to the physical body, as I practice and as I dive deeper into my own spiritual laboratory, I learn and discover where those things are stuck, where my physical body needs care or attention. And in doing so, purify my relationship, transform my relationship and my connection to the divine being of the earth, and where that being lives in my subtle body. So everything outside of us is inside of us. And so on and so forth with water and fire and air and space. And it's said that once that process is complete and all of the energy has withdrawn from the world, the path of yoga is part of the return to the source, is the withdrawal of our energy outward. The withdrawal of our energy being projected into the world, withdrawing that in so that we can perceive and become aware of where it's coming from. Where is the energy of life coming from? Because it's emerging from within us. It's coming out of us. It's coming out of me. It's coming out of you. So we withdraw and we return back home, back in. And then the jiva, the soul, like a drop, returns to the ocean. The light returns to the source before the death, before the physical death of the physical body. That's the path of yoga. To make the final offering of oneself, my ego and my personality, my identity, to offer that to the fire. The fire here in the dhuni, but also the fire here. Inwardly offering oneself to be transformed by the divine. Thank you for joining me for the session tonight, talking about Bhuta Shuddhi. It's been a real pleasure to share. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe, leave me a comment. Be sure to check out a practice on the channel or one of my other vlogs if you enjoy this type of dialogue about the path of yoga. Go enjoy your beautiful life. That's all. I'll see y'all soon.